Hello, everybody. So we've had some really inspiring talks this morning. We had Liliana's 23 years of work and employment, and there was so much of learning in all of them. So I just want to quickly go through some of the things that I found really amazing. Is the sibling training that you do, and training the individuals with disabilities to look after their families. Many of them are financial providers. That, of course, happens, say, some of the people that we work with here as well. But this whole thing of supporting families at times of, illness and looking after them, I thought that was absolutely amazing. And the champion of chores, that is so important. Joe touched on it as well. And in India, we really don't believe that people should work. And there's this whole thing about, not kind of looking down on anything that is considered manual labor is such a strong part of our DNA. And I think it was critical that both of you all talked about that. And I really like this thing of the functional national curriculum. If there's any time, then it might be a good idea if you could talk about it, or we could talk about it later on. And Dr. Lawrence Fung's, this whole thing of focusing on the area of strengths and competencies and interests. And, that is really where we are beginning to move in India. Because too long we've been stuck on deficits, what the individual cannot do. And even now, when you read reports that come from various places, it's kind of a list of things that the kid cannot do. And there is hardly anything on what the child can do, what the child enjoys, what the interests are. And one of the things that I really loved was this neurodiverse student support program, because in India, we are still struggling with students who are in post-secondary education. And of course, many of them are getting into colleges, but it's a real struggle to get the colleges to agree to provide any kind of support. And barring one or two kind of more, what should I say? What's the word? Colleges who are really thinking ahead, most places you do not get the kind of support that you were talking about. So, there was so much to learn in all of this. And of course, Namita, your sharing of the program that you started, and that's really what the conference is all about. And there is so much more learning we will have tomorrow as well. So it was really lovely to see the video from the center and hear from your team members as well. And Joe, you took away everything that I had to say and said it about 100 times better than I could have ever said it with all your beautiful... Joe is a fabulous photographer, and you could see those examples up there. So having said that, and self-determination, which is something that we really don't think about, something that people with disabilities need to have. And not just with developmental disabilities, it often happens with physical disabilities as well, where the mind works exactly like everybody else's. So, very, very important things. So how do we go about this? Are they divided up in, do we just take up the questions and look at them? Okay. Acha, this is for, I'll take mine later. This is for me. This is for Dr. Fung, yes. Would you like to take a look at them? And I think those are all, they've been divided, I think. Oh, they're divided. I realized the first two were mine, and the others are all divided.
So there's a question, what are the few areas of work that interest individuals on spectrum the most? So I think it's, there's different ways of interpreting the question. So it may be the profession that the person is referring to, or the type of stuff that the person is interested in. So in the United States, there are a lot of people that are on the spectrum that are very interested in like programming. Cybersecurity actually is a emerging field that seemed to be popular for individuals on the spectrum. But in terms of like the type of stuff that people like, a lot of people like video games. A lot of people like things that are related to animation. So that's what I'm seeing kind of clinically. Should we move on to?
This is an excellent question for the India Autism Centers coming up. How can safeguarding from potential abuse be built into the community that the India Autism Center is constructing? I think this is probably one of the most fundamental things that we have to face. As I said in my talk, our kids are 3 times as likely to be abused. And one of the problems is ignorance, that we willfully or not so willfully turn a blind eye to what is going on in our own houses. And many people are being abused. It's actually primarily being abused in their own homes. But the institutional risks for abuse are great because there's less accountability, there's more chance of getting away with it. I think that training is absolutely critical, and it has to become the kind of training that everybody takes on board as their personal responsibility, that it's not just the management who are responsible, that every individual working in a center like the IAC have to take personal responsibility for. Training is really amazing. I always thought that we were a well-trained organization. We had 0 tolerance for any kind of violence, any kind of verbal or physical violence against our children. But it wasn't until we got properly trained that I started to see things. I fired 2 people in that first year after getting the training because I suddenly woke up to what was going on. So it's there in front of you. In the best run organizations, you are going to see abuse because we all live in this world, and the statistics apply to us as they apply to anybody else. It's not some amorphous group out there doing it, it's us. So once you get aware, you start to see things that you had missed completely. So I think the training is the most important thing that IAC can invest in, and training has to be ongoing. It doesn't happen once and then it's over. You train every year. For people who are really intimately involved, like the child protection officer, they get trained every 3 months, every 6 months. They review cases with supervisors. They do damage control immediately, and then they see what led to that. Why did that happen? And then we institute changes in the way that we function so that it doesn't happen again.
Well, I would like to add something to that question. One way that really have helped us to prevent sexual abuse have been not only training the staff, educating the parents, and educating our children. We have 2 court cases that we already have won, and children of our students that were abused when they went to a hospital, and it was when they were when they tell to the mother, go to find this medication that the person abused this kid, or the father too. But to take them to court and all that takes 2 years, but our students could talk and could describe the things because we have teach them how to do it. So I think that's very, very important. One thing that Mary was talking in her talk that many parents see it as tragic when you have a child with autism. For one of the most rewarding things for us is when a parent tell me my son is a blessing. All the things he's giving me, he is the one that now I never imagined that he's the one supporting the house and all that. So I think it's turning the tragic into really, if you concentrate in the abilities, if you educate a family, and maybe I would then answer the questions after Namita. I have some questions, but may I answer later. Well, one of the questions they turn about is family. To be a father or a mother of any kid is very difficult. And we concentrate a lot in the families because we believe that it's not, if there's not a family participation, it's going to be very hard to be successful with one of students. I don't have any student that have been successful without the participation of the family. So that's why we call the power of two. The question is, there are some parents who enroll their kids to special schools and then are not willing to participate with the schools equally. How to motivate them? Well, in the center, since the beginning, we put the expectations. So the parents sign contracts of participation. If you want to be in the center, this is the things that we expect for you. If the parents say, no, I cannot participate, we give them a list of other schools where only they could put them there and they don't ask them nothing. But for the population that we are working, and for how much we believe we work in a team with the families, we really request the participation of the family. It's a whole program. Even beginning to work with, we don't start working with the student. The parents receive before his son enter a big workshop, so we could really tell them all what's going on and change some myth that they have about their kid. Okay.
Should I go ahead? Yeah. Okay, I've been asked if I could share the mistakes that I made as a parent so that others can avoid it. And being a parent and not an expert in this field, I would like to say that please catch them young. Start off with intervention early. That was one of my biggest mistakes because I did not catch it early. Maybe it was because there was a lack of awareness. There was a dearth of places out here where I could go for intervention. But that was my biggest mistake. As I mentioned, that I realized that only when he was 7 or 8. So please catch it early. Don't just go on all the, what your grannies and everybody says, that, oh, even you spoke when you were 3, or even you walked when you were this thing. No, it doesn't work that way. You have got to see, and you've got to actually see the signs that there is something amiss. Please just take it on from there, seek whatever help you have, but don't make that mistake, because I think, things would have been much better for my son and for us. Not that I'm not this thing, I'm very happy with the way he's progressed. I'm very happy, but please, that's my heart, this thing, it's a request from the bottom of my heart to not just parents, but even to all the professionals, to even teachers who are working in teaching in neurotypical schools. Please look out for those signs in the young ones, where you see that there is something amiss. And we are doing our bit by going and spreading awareness programs, having workshops on autism. So that's about it.
So the next question is, how is the workplace benefiting from neurodiversity? So there's a slide that I showed. Neurodiversity is a competitive advantage. Actually, it came out from an article from Harvard Business Review a couple of years ago, documenting that there's a case in SAP, a software company, that because of the individual on the spectrum in the team, that team saved the company $40 million. So it's just one of the cases that they reported. I know many of these cases, individuals on the spectrum winning like huge awards in companies, so innovation, because of the difference in their thinking, because of their deep interests, that really make the problem solving get to the really different level. Is much better for the companies. And on the other hand, in a lot of the places, especially in the tech companies, there's a lot of turnover in their jobs. A lot of people that are doing programming, they work in the company for like a year or two, and then they can move to another place. And companies actually lose a lot because of the turnover. Individuals on the spectrum, on the other hand, when they like their job, when they think they are part of the team, they feel belonged, they stay. So that saves the company money as well. So in terms of the the organization, there's a lot of reports about the teams that have individuals on the spectrum have higher morale than others. So because of all those different aspects, having neurodiverse individuals in the workplace is definitely good for the company.
I have two questions asking the same thing. How do you convince parents who are reluctant to allow children to start doing things for themselves? And I think the fact that there are 2 out of the 4 questions asking the same thing indicates the kind of cultural resistance there is to allowing children to make their own decisions, to actively engage, to do their own thing, and particularly where it comes to chores. I think that cultural resistance to the idea, it's obviously it's an upper class kind of a problem, but what you said, Liliana, about show me, that's what we do with parents who are reluctant. We show them what their kids are capable of. We take videos of them in the centers doing things that they would never believe they could do at home. And when they see that competence and the pride that they see in their children sometimes does the trick. It doesn't always do it, though, and I think we have to be honest about this, that the values of the family are important, and people who don't value washing dishes, who think that that's somebody else's job, who think that, sweeping is beneath their child, that is a problem, and it's something that we're not probably going to get beyond. I think that those caste beliefs, those ideas that there are different kinds of work and different kinds of people can do them, you can keep giving examples, and we do, of very successful people who wash their own clothes, who sweep their own driveways, who do all these things. You can point to examples in the West where people are, we all grew up doing, I clean bathrooms, I've done so many things that are considered beneath me here. All we can do is keep trying and hope that parents will see the joy that their children get from being competent, from being able to do their own work and to see a future in that for possible jobs. But it's not an easy battle. I think this is something that is going to take many generations before we can really successfully address it. It's for you
before I
as
take
well.
my question, I just wanted to add something about, we were talking about abuse earlier, Joe. I think there is sexual abuse, but the other kind of abuse that we often don't talk about is the physical and emotional abuse that a lot of people with autism put up with. And that, in some ways, is far more pervasive, and it happens a lot more, and it goes under the radar because it's not seen as abuse. It's seen as okay. And that, I think, is also a very, very important aspect to look at. I'll take one quick question here about recognizing the interior feelings in children with ASD is often difficult for parents who are faced with negative vibes from society. How do we make it more easy? I really think that, yes, it is difficult when you're a parent, when you're constantly faced with people saying that, it's so terrible that you've got this kid with autism, who's such a tragic thing. And, there's this whole business of karma. I've heard people say things like, you must have done something, which is why you have a child like this. And I think at one level, parents will have to stop and ask themselves, which is more important for me? Is the people outside saying things to me about my child more important, or is my child more important? And I think that is, it's not easy, but it is something that can be done. So, one of the commonest things is when parents go out and, people stop them and ask them questions and stuff like that. Very often, we see a lot of negativity in that, but sometimes it's not negativity. It's like if, for instance, Joe walked down the road, right, in the middle of, say, older part of Calcutta. I can bet you a lot of people will stop and stare. Why? Because she's not brown skinned, she's got light colored hair, she looks different, it's just pure curiosity. And we look at people if they are different. And sometimes when people look at our kids, they just look because they're wondering, they're flapping and doing stuff. They're not thinking, oh, you're a bad mother, or, having all those thoughts. Those are things that we are actually projecting, our thoughts and our feelings. So I think the simplest thing to ask myself when something like this happens is, who's more important? Is my kid more important, or that guy saying something more important? And once I get that clear in my head, I think it makes it much simpler. It's not easy, but it's simple. I'll take another quick one. What is the ideal parenting style which may be followed to facilitate holistic development of child and accept them unconditionally? I don't know the ideal parenting style, but I think basically seeing the child as a person, seeing the not constantly focusing on the disability and what the child cannot do. For instance, I was talking about how I lose my cool sometimes, but nobody sees me and says, oh, Mary, she's that aggressive woman. Nobody says that. They talk about me who's with Action for Autism and me who does this. But the same people would look at Neeraj, and if they had seen him do something, they say, oh, that violent, aggressive, autistic man. Because that becomes the defining factor. And I think if we as parents and professionals move away from that, and otherwise the parenting style is the same as anybody else. I don't know if anybody wants to add something to that. I would think the parenting is the same, except that, So Liliana, you wanted to add something to that?
Well, I would like to add, always take care of the parent.
Yeah.
Because the kid is a mirror sometimes of the parent. The parent is stressed, the child is stressed. So we in the center have a lot of training courses for the parents, so they keep developing as persons, how they deal with the stress. And they have even groups where they sing, where they dance, so they could reduce the stress. Always ask the parent, what I have suggested you have helped you. What kinds of things you want that I teach you, and be humble with the parent. We could have studied in the universities. I could have a PhD, but sometimes I learn very important lessons from parents that don't read, don't write, but they have the experience of having a child with different abilities. And I think the other thing is use the win-win situation. If a parent doesn't agree with you, is that you have to always win. Try to understand, get to a point of agreement with them, and that they have to be really members of the team. You imagine that in the center, the parents evaluate us like 2 or 3 times a year, and we have to prepare our staff that the parent is going to tell us if he thinks that we are training in a good way, and if we are treating even his son as a person. Because the parent is looking to us and saying, you as a professional are giving more attention to this kid versus that kid and all that. And so for us, we even have changed our language to be the language of a communicator, that the parents could understand it. Because we don't even to invite persons to talk to the School of Families, we want persons that could talk simple. We don't want persons that the parent tell me, the doctor speak very nice, but we didn't understand nothing that he say because he speak too complicated. So I feel that I would congratulate all the parents that are here in the auditorium. Could they stand up? Because you are my teachers, okay? Thank you.
And I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is that as professionals, we spend maybe 6 hours with the child. But the parent has to take care of the child the rest of the 18 hours. So, and as professionals, it's something we've chosen to do. And we can walk out the day we want to. But no parent can say, I'm going to walk out from my parenting. It's there for life. And I think that's something important to keep in mind.
It's a practice in the center. They have to take a kid 24 hours.
Exactly.
Walk in the shoes of the parent too.
Yes, absolutely. And I think one of the things that parents can often do is to get to know other parents. And I think nothing is as incredible as knowing another 3 or 4 parents and to know that they are going through what you're going through. And also they often form great support systems. Even if they may not be able to keep your child, to be able to go out together with your children, with other parents I know for me, that was something that was a great thing that I could do when Neeraj was younger. And I found that a great support. And I think that perhaps could be helpful for a lot of parents.
Can I just add one thing to that, though? I think parents also are not just parents, and that has to be remembered as well, that we have a life apart from the fact that we have a child with a disability. We don't identify as parents of typical children wherever we go. It's not the first thing we tell people when we meet them at a party, oh, I have two totally normal children. You know, so I think it's important, particularly for the moms, that they not get so absorbed in their role as the parent of a disabled person, and remember that they have other talents and other skills and things that they enjoy doing, and to identify with those as well.
If I may quickly add something to that, you know, one of the discussions that often happens is that, you know, parents would tell each other, or they'd be told that now that you have a child who's been diagnosed, you should give up your job. And we say, no, never. If a parent wants to give up a job and be with the child, it has to be a choice that they want to do out of their wanting, not because they're being forced to do it. It is much better for a parent to go out and have whatever profession they have, spend their day doing that, and come and spend 15 minutes of happy time with their child is far better than spending 24 hours thinking that I gave up my job for my child. And I think it's very, very important for parents to know that no, you do not have to give up your life for your child. Never think of it that way. And oftentimes the pressure is very strong in India, that you must give up what you do and be with your child because now you got a diagnosis, your child has a diagnosis. That's not right at all.
So this question it says, at universities with themed or otherwise distinctive student residence halls, people high in autistic traits tend to self-select into particular residences. This availability of informed peer support of a place to come home to carries great impact on academic and personal success or failure. What is the policy implication for residential colleges? So we are kind of like early in our program. We're really learning what policies would be reasonable. What we know is that a lot of the students on the spectrum, when they are transitioning from high school to college, they have a lot of ego. They think that they are going to be just fine. This is a fresh start. And they may want to even intentionally make choices that would be not the best for them. But basically what we are trying to do right now is so our program is really barely starting. We want to have 20 students by the end of the academic year. We have 5 students so far. They all chose different residence halls, and they live in different residence halls. And some of them are clearly not as ideal. But they have the autonomy. They're adults. They can make their own choices. I think what we will want to do as an accommodation, what we did is before the student orientation for the general population of freshmen going in to campus, we have a transition orientation. So basically, the students came to campus 4 days before everybody else. So this way, they learn a lot more about campus, and they feel less overwhelmed. Instead of thousands of people fighting to get into their rooms, there are only a few of them. So they can make clear choices earlier on because of the environment a little bit less overwhelming for them. But ultimately, they make their own decisions. I think what I would want the residence deans and the residence fellows who are making choices for the policies would be to allow them to have some flexibility to make changes. Because there are some universities that basically have the kind of policy of wanting the students to be kind of stuck to a particular residence hall for a long period of time because of the kind of community building. But sometimes it's just not the best choice. So I think we need the flexibility to be built in as an accommodation. But over time, I think we'll learn more what may be better policy changes that should be included.
So again, as a parent of an individual on the spectrum, what advice do you give to other parents, especially parents with kids just diagnosed? Well, I think the first and foremost advice to all the young mothers, young fathers, grandparents, everybody in the family, the only this thing is that first and foremost you need to, I know it's difficult, I know it's very difficult and it's easier said than done. It is devastating to have learned that yes, your child is on the spectrum. But yeah, please be acceptant, please accept that fact. Please accept that fact, because if you do not accept it, how do you expect the society in large to accept it? And that is what we are looking at. We want the society to change. We've had enough of autism awareness. Now let's have autism acceptance being celebrated.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. Autism awareness we've done enough of. We now need to move to acceptance. I've got a question here that says, as a professional, I keep hearing terms like, my child is rigid and obstinate and too routine-oriented, but I find that schools and parents are the ones who are rigid and obstinate about allowing for accommodations in schools and homes. How do you deal with this issue? Yes, this is a challenge, and this is something what I mentioned earlier when I was talking, that the very fact that people with autism look like everybody else, they are expected to act non-autistic, and therefore people are very unwilling to provide accommodations. You know, you're talking about your student program at Stanford. And what happens is that, you know, for instance, in in India, you have students with disabilities in colleges. And if those students are on wheelchairs or they're blind, they get all the accommodations they need because people can see what it is they want. And the other students are also far more willing to do whatever is required. But when there are people with autism, not only is the university unwilling to do anything, other students are not very kind. And that's because it is what is known as a mental disorder. And I think people sometimes like to take the mickey out of people if they feel they can, you know, make fun of them. And it's easy to make fun of somebody who's, you know, not getting intent and stuff like that. And we know that studies tell us that people with autism are the most bullied community of students in the world. Every study has shown that. And that is why it is difficult to make accommodations, to convince schools to make accommodations. But one of the things that we found useful is to talk to the schools and to the parents about doing a session, helping them to understand autism and how it impacts each individual, so that they begin to understand why those accommodations are required. It's a little bit like, you know, yesterday there was a question about using AACs with people with disabilities, right? And somebody asked, will they become dependent on AACs? They don't become dependent on AACs, right? They actually, if anything, many of them learn to start using speech. And even if they don't, they have a mode of communication. So similarly, very often people will say, oh, if we provide any kind of accommodations, particularly if it's a visual or a structured schedule or something, they will use it all their lives. So what? I use a planner even now, and I'll use it till the day I die. Right? Nobody tells me why using a planner now. I've been using my glasses. Nobody's told me that you've worn glasses for 30 years, now take it off. I will continue to use my glasses. If anything, I'll need thicker lenses. But with people with autism, this is what happens. But I think these are the examples that we have to give to schools and examples we have to give to parents to help them understand. Very often, they're unwilling to do it because they don't get it. They don't get because for most of them, autism is a badly behaved child. And we have to change that understanding. That is nothing to do with bad behavior. It's about how they perceive the world, how they experience the world. And that is what we have to get across. 2 minutes. One last question. Who wants to take it?
They said how the fathers participate in the center. And the fathers are participating much more, even they travel with us, because in Peru too, the mothers are having more options at work than the fathers, so the fathers sometimes are taking more care of the kids. So it's very interesting that right now they have a very important role, is increasing the number of parents participating. And I see even when the wife dies, is a father that's taking care of the kids. So I see the role of the father more important. I would say only when you're dealing with the father or the mother, always be their friend. They are watching you as so much. And as you reinforce the kid, reinforce the parent.
Yes.
They need, all of us need somebody to tell us, you're doing a good job, and they need it. Don't criticize it.
Yeah.
We have one rule in the center, never criticize a parent,
Yes.
because you're not in their shoes. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good question, and I love your response. I'm wondering how many mothers are here of kids with autism? And how many fathers? So I think that's an important. In India, we're getting father. Thank you to all the fathers who are here. Yeah, seriously, because it's very hard to get fathers involved here. Yes, Dr. Fung, you had a.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, last words.
I just wanted to make one more comment about
The nation wants to know.
My favorite accommodation is that digital countdown at red lights that we all really connect with, because we're sitting there waiting, hoping it's going to change, hoping it's
Exactly.
going to change. And we've got that digital reminder that says it's almost over, calm down, it's almost over. And the other thing that happens in airports when there is a problem with a flight, the first complaint that people make is that they don't get information. It's not that they're late, it's that they don't get information from the airline.
Yes.
And those are two accommodations that are very integral to accommodating people with autism, and we all love them. So it's not hard to understand why people need these things. We all need them.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Liliana, Joe, Dr. Fung, Namita. Thank you, audience. You all have been fabulous.
How come he's Dr. Fung and we are all first name?
I couldn't remember his first name.
Lawrence.
Thank you, Mary, for chairing this session, and Dr. Mayo, Dr. Fung, Namita Somani, and Joe Chopra for being a part of it.